The grandfather clock in Clarence's house struck 11:30 as Queen sat in her private study, surrounded by stacks of official correspondence and half-empty teacups. The weight of her new role as Queen Consort had been pressing down on her shoulders for months now, and tonight felt particularly heavy. Outside, London's autumn rain drummed against the tall windows, creating a rhythm that matched her restless thoughts. She had spent the evening reviewing reports from various royal engagements, charity patronages, and upcoming state visits. The workload seemed endless, and despite her years of preparation as the Duchess of Cornwall, nothing could have fully prepared her for the intensity of being Queen Consort. Every decision she made was scrutinized, every public appearance analyzed, and every word she spoke could make headlines across the globe. The door to her study opened quietly, and her private secretary entered with another pile of documents. Had been with the royal household for over 2 decades and knew better than anyone how to read the Queen Consort's moods. Tonight, she could see the frustration etched across his face. "Your Majesty, these are the final preparations for tomorrow's charity gala," said softly, placing the papers on the already cluttered desk. "The palace staff wanted your approval on the seating arrangements and the order of speeches." Rubbed her temples and looked at the clock again. The charity gala was an important event, one that would raise funds for literacy programs across the United Kingdom. It was a cause close to her heart, but the pressure to make everything perfect was overwhelming. She knew that hundreds of wealthy donors would be attending, along with members of Parliament, celebrities, and of course, the media. "I need this event to be flawless," said, her voice carrying a hint of desperation. "The press has been particularly harsh lately, questioning my ability to fill this role effectively. Tomorrow's gala could be the turning point we need." Nodded understandingly. She had witnessed the Queen Consort's struggles with public perception ever since the coronation. Despite genuine dedication to her charitable work and her unwavering support for King Charles, certain sections of the media and public remained critical. The comparison to the late Princess Diana was constant and unforgiving. As reviewed the seating charts, her eyes fell upon one particular name that made her pause. The Princess of Wales was listed to give the opening remarks and present the evening's main award. This detail suddenly sparked an idea in his mind, though it would prove to be one she would later regret. The relationship between and had always been cordial but complex. Both women were strong personalities who had married into the royal family under very different circumstances, had captured the public's heart from the moment her relationship with Prince William became public, while had faced years of scrutiny and criticism before gradually winning some acceptance. In that late-night moment, influenced by fatigue and pressure, made a decision that seemed logical but was ultimately misguided. She reached for her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found his number. The Princess of Wales was known to be an early riser, often starting her days with morning exercises and reviewing her schedule, but calling this late was unusual even for royal family communications. The phone rang several times before his voice answered, slightly groggy but alert. "Your Majesty, is everything all right?" "I apologize for calling so late," began, her voice formal yet urgent. "I'm reviewing the final details for tomorrow's literacy gala, and I need to make some important changes to your role in the event." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Was sitting up in bed now, fully awake and sensing the tension in her mother-in-law's voice. Prince William stirred beside her but remained asleep, exhausted from his own busy schedule of royal duties. "Of course, Your Majesty. What changes do you need?" responded diplomatically, though privately she wondered why this couldn't wait until morning. Took a deep breath before continuing. "I've decided that your opening remarks tomorrow should focus specifically on acknowledging my role in promoting literacy initiatives. The speech should emphasize how my leadership has transformed these programs and how grateful the beneficiaries are for my personal involvement." The request caught off guard. The original speech she had prepared was a balanced overview of the literacy program's impact, highlighting the collective efforts of all involved, including volunteers, donors, and beneficiaries. To suddenly shift the focus to praise specifically felt unusual and potentially awkward for the audience. "I understand your concern about recognition, Your Majesty," replied carefully, "but wouldn't it be more effective if the focus remained on the programs themselves and the people they help? The audience will be there to support the cause, not necessarily to hear about individual contributions." Fatigue and stress began to show more clearly in her response. I need you to understand the position I'm in. Every appearance I make is being judged and criticized. This gala represents months of my personal work, and I need the public to see that I'm making a real difference. Your words carry significant weight, and I need you to use that influence to support me." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with becoming increasingly insistent about her vision for speech. She wanted specific phrases included, particular achievements highlighted, and a tone that would clearly position her as the driving force behind the literacy initiative's success. Listened patiently, understanding the pressure her mother-in-law was under but also recognizing the potential problems with this approach. The demand felt somewhat desperate and could backfire if the audience perceived it as self-promotion rather than genuine advocacy for the cause. "Your Majesty, I want to support you in every way possible," said diplomatically, "but I think we should consider how this might be received. Perhaps we could find a way to highlight your contributions while still maintaining the focus on the charitable work itself." But had already made up her mind. The stress of recent criticism, combined with her exhaustion, had clouded her usual political instincts. "I'm not asking for your opinion on this matter. I'm giving you a direct instruction about what needs to be said tomorrow. I expect you to follow these guidelines precisely." The formality and firmness in its tone made it clear that this was not a request but a command. Felt the weight of the awkward position she was being placed in. As a member of the royal family, she was expected to show respect and deference to the queen consort. But as someone who had built her own reputation on authentic public service, she was uncomfortable with being asked to deliver what essentially amounted to a promotional speech. After the call ended, sat in the darkness of her bedroom, processing what had just occurred. She understood frustrations and genuinely wanted to support her, but the approach felt wrong. The late-night timing, the demanding tone, and the self-promotional nature of the request all seemed out of character for the carefully managed world of royal public relations. Meanwhile, back in her study, felt a mixture of relief and unease. She had asserted her authority and ensured that tomorrow's event would highlight her contributions as she felt they deserved. However, a small voice in the back of her mind wondered if she had handled the situation in the best way possible. Neither woman could have predicted at that moment how this late-night conversation would set in motion a series of events that would ultimately teach both of them valuable lessons about leadership, family dynamics, and the art of turning potential disasters into unexpected triumphs. The real test would come the following evening, when would take the stage at the charity gala with hundreds of eyes watching and cameras rolling, carrying the weight of both her own reputation and her complicated relationship with the queen consort. The morning light filtered through the elegant curtains of Kensington Palace as sat at her breakfast table, still troubled by the previous night's conversation. Prince William had already left for an early morning engagement with veterans' organizations, leaving her alone with her thoughts and a cup of rapidly cooling tea. The speech she was supposed to deliver that evening lay before her, covered in red ink corrections and additions that had insisted upon during their lengthy phone call. His personal assistant, Emma, knocked gently on the door before entering. Emma had worked with the Princess of Wales for several years and had developed an intuitive understanding of her employer's moods and concerns. This morning, she immediately sensed something was troubling. "Your Royal Highness, I have the final details for tonight's gala," Emma said, setting down a folder of documents. "The venue has been prepared, the guest list is confirmed, and the media arrangements are in place. Is there anything else you need to review?" Looked up from the marked-up speech with a weary expression. "Emma, have you ever been asked to do something that felt right in theory but wrong in practice?" Emma paused, recognizing that this was more than a rhetorical question. "May I ask what's concerning you, Your Royal Highness?" Gestured toward the speech papers. "Last night, Queen called with specific instructions about what I should say tonight. She wants me to focus the opening remarks entirely on praising her personal contributions to the literacy programs. While I certainly want to acknowledge her work, the whole approach feels misguided." Emma sat down across from, understanding the delicate nature of the situation. The royal family's internal dynamics were complex, and navigating relationships between different members required careful consideration of protocol, hierarchy, and public perception. "What specifically concerns you about the approach?" Emma asked diplomatically. Sighed and picked up the speech. "Listen to this. Thanks to Queen's visionary leadership and tireless personal dedication, these literacy programs have achieved unprecedented success. Or this part, we owe our progress entirely to Her Majesty's innovative approach and hands-on involvement. It sounds like a campaign speech rather than a charity appeal. The more read from the revised speech, the more uncomfortable she became with its tone. The original version she had prepared focused on the real impact of the literacy programs, sharing stories of children who had learned to read, adults who had gained new skills, and communities that had been transformed through education. The new version, dictated by, shifted all attention to the Queen Consort herself. Emma listened carefully, understanding's dilemma. "Your Royal Highness, what do you think would happen if you delivered the speech as requested?" Had been thinking about this question all morning. "Honestly, I think it would backfire terribly. The audience tonight includes education professionals, charity workers, and people who have dedicated their lives to literacy causes. They want to hear about impact and outcomes, not about individual glory. If I spend the entire opening focused on praising, it could come across as tone-deaf or even desperate." The irony of the situation was not lost on. Its intention was to boost her public image and demonstrate her value to the royal family's charitable work. However, the heavy-handed approach could achieve exactly the opposite result, making her appear insecure and self-promoting rather than genuinely committed to the cause. As the morning progressed, found herself caught between loyalty to her family and her instinct for effective public service. She respected and understood the pressures she faced as Queen Consort. The comparisons to Princess Diana, the constant media scrutiny, and the challenge of carving out her own meaningful role within the royal family were all very real struggles that deserved empathy. However, also recognized that following instructions exactly as given could damage not only the Queen Consort's reputation, but also the effectiveness of the charity event itself. The literacy programs they were supporting had helped thousands of people, and those beneficiaries deserved an evening that celebrated their achievements rather than serving as a platform for royal self-promotion. Around midday, received a text message from Prince William. "How are you feeling about tonight's speech? Remember, authenticity always wins in the end." His words reminded her of one of the core principles that had guided her approach to royal duties from the beginning. The public responded positively to genuine emotion and sincere advocacy, while they could quickly detect and reject anything that felt manufactured or self-serving. Spent the afternoon wrestling with her options. She could deliver the speech exactly as it demanded, fulfilling her duty as a daughter-in-law but potentially damaging the event's effectiveness. She could refuse outright to make the changes, which would create family conflict and possibly escalate into a more serious confrontation. Or she could find a third option that somehow honored its need for recognition while preserving the integrity of the charitable message. As she sat in her private office, reviewing files about the literacy program's actual impact, inspiration began to strike. Realized that the most powerful way to highlight anyone's contributions to a cause was not through direct praise, but through demonstrating the real-world results of their work. Instead of telling the audience how wonderful was, she could show them by sharing specific stories of success. Began drafting a new version of her speech, one that would weave together personal stories from program beneficiaries with genuine appreciation for all the contributors, including, rather than generic praise, she would highlight specific moments where involvement had made a tangible difference. This approach would feel more authentic to the audience while still giving the Queen Consort the recognition she sought. Emma returned to his office in the late afternoon to find her employer much more energetic and focused than she had been that morning. "Your Royal Highness, you seem to have found a solution to your concerns." Looked up with a smile. "I think I have. Instead of following script exactly, I'm going to tell the real story of these literacy programs, including the genuine ways that her involvement has helped. But I'm going to do it through the voices of the people who have actually benefited." As the afternoon turned to evening, prepared for the gala with a growing sense of confidence. She had found a way to navigate the difficult situation that respected both her family obligations and her commitment to effective advocacy. However, she had no way of knowing how would react to her creative interpretation of the requested speech, or whether her solution would truly resolve the underlying tensions that had led to the late-night phone call in the first place. The stage was set for an evening that would test both women's understanding of leadership, family loyalty, and the delicate art of public service. His decision to chart her own course through the challenging situation would soon prove either wise or disastrous, with hundreds of influential guests and millions of potential media viewers as witnesses to the outcome. The grand ballroom at the Royal Lancaster, London buzzed with anticipation as guests arrived for the annual Literacy Champions Gala. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with elegant floral arrangements, while photographers captured images of celebrities, politicians, and philanthropists making their way through the reception area. The atmosphere was electric with the energy of people gathered for a worthy cause, though underlying tensions remained hidden beneath the polished surface. Queen arrived with King Charles precisely at 7 o'clock, her deep blue evening gown shimmering under the lights as they made their way through the receiving line. She had spent extra time with her stylist that afternoon, ensuring every detail of her appearance was perfect. This evening represented months of careful planning and personal investment, and she was determined that it would showcase her value to the monarchy and her genuine commitment to literacy causes. As greeted various guests and posed for photographs, her eyes frequently scanned the room looking for. She had not spoken to her daughter-in-law since their late-night phone conversation, choosing instead to trust that her instructions would be followed precisely. The speech she had outlined would finally give her the public recognition she felt she deserved for her hard work on these important programs. Meanwhile, Prince William entered through a side entrance, avoiding some of the media attention to allow time to collect her thoughts before her speech. She carried herself with quiet confidence, having spent the day refining her remarks into something that felt both authentic and respectful. The revised speech was tucked safely in her evening purse, representing hours of careful consideration and rewriting. Prince William noticed his wife's focused demeanor as they moved through the crowd. "Are you nervous about tonight?" he asked quietly. Smiled and squeezed his hand. "Not nervous, exactly, just determined to handle this situation well. I think I've found the right approach, but we'll know for sure once I'm up there." The first hour of the gala proceeded smoothly with cocktails and networking, allowing guests to connect with one another and learn more about the literacy programs being supported. Representatives from various educational charities shared information about their work, while volunteers who had contributed thousands of hours to teaching and tutoring were recognized for their service. As dinner was served, the formal program began with welcoming remarks from the gala's organizing committee. Queen watched from the head table, her anticipation building as speech time approached. She had positioned herself where she could easily observe the audience's reactions to the praise that would soon be directed her way. When the moment finally arrived, rose gracefully and walked to the podium with poised confidence. The room fell silent as hundreds of guests turned their attention to the Princess of Wales, many of them familiar with her reputation for heartfelt and effective public speaking. Television cameras focused on her face as she arranged her notes and looked out at the distinguished audience. "Good evening, everyone," began, her voice warm and clear. "When I think about literacy, I don't think about statistics or policy papers or government initiatives. I think about Maria." This opening immediately captured the audience's attention because it was personal and unexpected. Had chosen to begin not with the formal acknowledgments that had requested, but with a human story that would resonate with everyone in the room. Maria is a 62-year-old grandmother from Manchester who came to one of our literacy programs last year because she wanted to read bedtime stories to her. She had managed to hide her inability to read for most of her adult life, developing elaborate strategies to avoid situations where her secret might be discovered. But when her first grandchild was born, she decided that love was more important than pride. Storytelling drew the audience in completely, and even Queen found herself leaning forward to hear more, temporarily forgetting her expectation of personal praise. The volunteer who worked with Maria told me that the breakthrough moment came when Maria successfully read her first complete sentence from a children's book. She cried tears of joy, not just because she could finally read, but because she realized that her would never have to wonder why Grandma couldn't tell them bedtime stories. The audience was visibly moved by this story and could see people throughout the room nodding with understanding and emotion. She continued weaving together several more personal anecdotes, each one illustrating the real impact of the literacy programs on individual lives. As her speech progressed, began to naturally incorporate recognition for various contributors to the program's success, including teachers, volunteers, donors, and program administrators. When she finally mentioned Queen, she did so in a way that felt organic and meaningful rather than forced. I've had the privilege of visiting several of these literacy centers alongside Queen, said, her tone genuine and respectful. What struck me most was watching her sit down with adult learners, not as a royal patron offering distant support, but as someone genuinely interested in their individual stories and struggles. I watched her spend an hour with James, a young father who was learning to read so he could help his children with homework. She didn't just pose for photos and leave. She asked thoughtful questions about his goals and challenges. This approach was entirely different from the promotional script that it demanded, yet it was actually more powerful because it demonstrated rather than declared the Queen Consort's value to the programs. The audience could visualize these personal interactions and understand the authentic engagement being described. Continued with another example. Queen also championed the expansion of our evening classes to accommodate working parents and caregivers. When she learned that many potential students couldn't attend daytime sessions, she personally advocated for funding to support additional evening and weekend options. That expansion has now served over 3,000 additional learners. Queen watched with growing amazement as speech unfolded. While it wasn't following the exact script she had demanded, it was actually achieving something far more valuable. Instead of generic praise that might have sounded hollow, was sharing specific examples of impact that demonstrated genuine leadership and compassion. The audience was clearly responding positively to this approach. People were engaged, moved, and inspired by the combination of personal stories and concrete examples of progress. The Queen Consort's contributions were being highlighted in ways that felt credible and meaningful rather than self-promotional. As moved toward her conclusion, she broadened her focus to acknowledge all the various contributors who had made the literacy program successful. These achievements belong to all of us, the volunteers who give their time, the donors who provide resources, the organizations that host programs, the families who support learners, and the brave individuals who decide that it's never too late to learn something new. The audience erupted in sustained applause, clearly moved by both the stories they had heard and the inclusive spirit of remarks. Even those who had arrived feeling somewhat obligated to attend a charity function were now genuinely energized about the cause and eager to continue supporting it. Queen found herself applauding with sincere enthusiasm, realizing that had somehow managed to achieve everything she had wanted from the evening in a way that was far more effective than her original plan. The recognition was there, but it felt earned and authentic rather than demanded. The audience respected and appreciated her contributions because they could understand their real-world impact. The remainder of the gala unfolded with remarkable success, building on the momentum that speech had created. Guests who had arrived with polite obligations to attend a charity function found themselves genuinely excited about supporting the literacy programs. Conversations throughout the ballroom buzzed with enthusiasm as people shared their own experiences with education and discussed ways they could contribute to the cause. During the auction portion of the evening, bids soared well beyond the organizers' expectations. A private dinner with renowned authors sold for 3 times its estimated value, while a package of personalized literacy tutoring sessions sparked a bidding war among several wealthy philanthropists. The energy that had generated through her authentic storytelling had translated directly into increased financial support for the programs. Queen moved through the crowd during the reception following the formal program, receiving numerous compliments about her work with the literacy initiatives. However, these congratulations felt different from the empty flattery she sometimes encountered at royal events. Guests were mentioning specific examples they had heard in speech, asking thoughtful questions about her experiences with individual learners, and expressing genuine interest in how they could support similar efforts. Lord Harrison, a prominent education philanthropist, approached with particular enthusiasm. "Your Majesty, I was deeply moved by the Princess of Wales's description of your personal engagement with the learners. So often we hear about royal patronages that seem somewhat distant, but what she described tonight sounded like genuine hands-on involvement." Felt a complex mixture of pride and humility as she responded. "The adult learners we work with are incredibly brave individuals. When someone decides to confront illiteracy later in life, they're overcoming not just educational challenges, but often years of shame and fear. Being able to support them in that journey is genuinely rewarding." As the conversation continued, realized that Lord Harrison's interest went beyond polite social interaction. He was asking substantive questions about program methodology, success rates, and expansion possibilities. Speech had not only highlighted its contributions, but had also positioned her as a knowledgeable advocate who could engage in serious discussions about literacy education. Meanwhile, spent the latter part of the evening speaking with program beneficiaries who had been invited to attend the gala. These conversations reinforced her decision to focus her speech on personal stories rather than institutional praise. Maria, the grandmother from Manchester whom she had mentioned in her opening, was present at the event and visibly moved by having her journey shared with such a distinguished audience. "Your Royal Highness," Maria said with tears in her eyes, "I never imagined that my story would be told to so many important people. When you mentioned reading to I felt like you truly understood what this program meant to me." Interaction with Maria and other program participants provided a stark reminder of why the evening's approach had been so effective. The focus on real human impact created emotional connections that abstract praise for royal involvement could never achieve. The beneficiaries felt valued and heard, while the donors gained a deeper understanding of how their contributions would be used. As the evening wound down and found themselves in a quiet corner of the ballroom, away from the remaining guests and media attention, the moment felt significant, as both women recognized that something important had shifted during the course of the evening. Began, her voice softer than it had been during their late-night phone conversation. "I owe you an apology. When I called you last night, I was feeling overwhelmed by criticism and pressure. I thought the solution was to demand more explicit recognition, but your approach tonight was far more effective than what I had in mind." Responded with genuine warmth and understanding. "Your Majesty, I completely understand why you felt that way. The scrutiny you face is intense, and it's natural to want your hard work acknowledged. I hope that tonight demonstrated how much respect people have for your authentic engagement with these programs." The conversation that followed was more honest and productive than many of their previous interactions. Acknowledged that her late-night call had been driven by insecurity rather than strategic thinking, while explained how she had tried to find a way to honor both the Queen Consort's need for recognition and the evening's charitable purpose. "What I learned tonight," reflected, "is that the most powerful recognition comes from demonstrated impact rather than demanded praise. When you shared specific stories about my interactions with learners, it meant more than any generic compliments could have achieved." Nodded in agreement. "I think audiences can always tell the difference between authentic advocacy and promotional messaging. Tonight's guests responded so positively because they could see the real human connections behind the programs." Their conversation was interrupted by Emma, who approached with a tablet showing early social media reactions to the evening. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with particular praise for storytelling approach and numerous mentions of Queen's hands-on involvement with literacy education. One tweet from a prominent education journalist read, "Tonight's literacy gala showcased the best of royal advocacy, personal stories, genuine impact, and authentic engagement. Queen's work with adult learners is clearly making a real difference." Another social media post from a guest at the event stated, "Moved to tears by the Princess of Wales's speech about literacy programs. Queen's personal commitment to individual learners shows what royal patronage can achieve when done with genuine care." The media coverage that emerged over the following days continued this positive trend. Rather than focusing on royal family dynamics or protocol, journalists wrote about the human impact of the literacy programs and the effective advocacy demonstrated at the gala. Several major newspapers featured follow-up stories about adult literacy education, using examples and statistics that had been highlighted during speech. Most significantly, the gala's success led to unexpected opportunities for expanding the literacy programs. Lord Harrison, who had been so impressed by his conversation with Queen, committed to funding 3 new learning centers in communities. Other donors stepped forward with offers of volunteer time, resources, and additional financial support. In the weeks that followed, Queen found herself in a fundamentally different position regarding her public role and confidence. The recognition she received after the gala felt earned and meaningful, based on substantive contributions rather than royal status alone. Her interactions with program beneficiaries became even more natural and effective, as she gained confidence in her ability to make a genuine difference. Meanwhile, learned valuable lessons about family diplomacy and the art of finding solutions that honor everyone's needs while maintaining integrity. The experience strengthened her relationship with Queen and demonstrated her growing skill at navigating complex royal family dynamics. The late-night phone call that had initially seemed like it might create lasting family tension had instead become the catalyst for a breakthrough in understanding between the two women. Queen's moment of insecurity had led to this moment of creative problem-solving, resulting in an outcome that benefited not only their relationship, but also the thousands of people served by the literacy programs they supported. Both women emerged from the experience with greater respect for each other's perspectives and a shared understanding of how effective advocacy could strengthen both their individual roles and their collective impact as members of the royal family. The command that had initially backfired had been transformed into a triumph that neither of them could have achieved alone.